Welcome back to Questions from the Waiting Room. This is episode 5. These are questions that patients are too afraid to ask their psychiatrist. I'm here with Dr. Nicholas Pejic, and I am Emily Harper, social media coordinator.
How are you doing?
Doing very well today. Are you ready for question number 1?
Yes, I am.
All right, Farah F. from Hillsboro, Oregon. Is it nature or nurture that affects human development?
Oh my goodness. Both, they say. That's a loaded question. And let's talk about what both of those mean. So nature would be what your genetics are, mostly, right? And then part of nature is the epigenetics, like how you interact with the environment. So if you're around carcinogens and you have DNA that may be more susceptible to developing cancer, then that's a nature issue. Like for personality and psychiatric issues, a lot of those things can be carried through genetics. I think I saw a documentary a few years ago about 3 triplets that were separated at birth, and each one of them kind of were quite similar in terms of what they did in their lives, which I thought was very interesting. I think that's that was the case. So like, for example, with nature, if somebody has a sibling that has schizophrenia or a parent, they may be at higher risk of developing not just schizophrenia, but also bipolar disorder, or unipolar depression. So that's the nature issue. Nurture, though, would be what's the environment like that you're growing up in? Are there any toxins in the environment, like lead paint, right? And then more to the point there, it's like, what's your nutrition like, and who are the people around you while growing up? So if you're a kid and your parents get divorced and your parents don't get along with each other, that might affect you. Therefore, the nurture part. If you have a verbally abusive parent who's devaluing you all throughout your childhood, then sometimes that pressure psychologically could affect your DNA, and anybody susceptible to developing anxiety or depression might be more prone to it if they're in that type of environment. So it's in my work here at Atlas Psychiatry. Whenever I meet anybody for the first visit, we'll spend like 90 minutes with them talking about all these different things. And part of the interview is a section about biological elements. That's like the nature. And then the other part is all the social stuff, like where is a person working? What was their childhood like? Are they in a relationship? Were they bullied when they were a kid? Had they ever been traumatized as a kid? And so we're synthesizing that in our mind to help that one particular person. So if anybody's listening to this and you're wondering, was it nature versus nurture for me? When you meet with a psychiatrist, usually it's a tailor-made answer for that person. I guess I could say that.
Okay. Monica R. from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. How do you feel about gay conversion therapy? Do you think it works?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. No, I don't think it works. I think that folks who identify their sexual orientation is for the same sex usually know that that's what their preference is. And I don't think it's appropriate type of treatment. And in psychiatry, I could say, yeah, I'm not an expert in that category of question, let's say, but I could see that being harmful to folks. I mean, imagine telling somebody who's straight, like, we're gonna do some therapy so you're attracted to some other or to the same sex or something, So generally, no, I would say I wouldn't think that would work.
Okay.
But Again, I'm not an expert in that category, and I'm probably not the best person to ask.
Okay. Question from Anonymous. I don't feel like hanging out with my friends anymore. I just want to be home and alone. Am I depressed?
Not necessarily. I have a lot of patients that are introverted and they prefer to be on their own, but there's a lot of social pressure for them to be out and about, hang out with friends. There's also the kind of question of, I'm going to miss out on things like FOMO, and like maybe the friendships won't continue to carry on if they don't go hang out with their friends. But I find that not to be the case. I think people can still maintain friendships with more separation. So a lot of times folks that just want to hang out by themselves they're just recharging their batteries because they're introverted. And by introvert, I mean somebody who requires alone time to recharge your batteries more so, like the ratio of like alone time to time with people is greater than somebody who's extroverted, who they develop more energy and they kind of recharge by being around other people, which for an introvert is hard to imagine. So I would say I would look at that. The second thing is, would that be like an avoidance type of thing, where are you avoiding a friend group for some conflict that's ongoing? Perhaps somebody hurt your feelings, or is somebody doing something in the friend group that you don't like? Are they using drugs or something that you dislike? Another thing I think about is some folks, they got to prune their friend tree, where you outgrow friendships and it's time to move on, or you don't have to completely move on, but perhaps you just don't spend as much time with certain people because you're doing other things. And it's not necessarily like, hey, I don't like you guys anymore. It's just like, I'm doing these other things and you're not into that, and therefore I'm not going to see them. Now, if somebody thought they were depressed and that's the reason why they're not being as social, that can be a thing for certain. There's something on the internet called Patient Health Questionnaire number 9, which is available to folks. And if someone's scoring of 7, 8, 9, or 10 or above on that, that often indicates that they have some depressive symptoms and would benefit from talking to somebody about it. That's one way to differentiate between depression and everything else. But again, this is not medical advice. I think each person would need to talk to either a therapist or to their doctor about it.
Last question. This is from AJA from Albuquerque, New Mexico. What do you think happens after death?
Oh my goodness. What do I think happens after death? Well, my father passed away in 2018, and I was in the room when he passed, and he and I talked a lot about life and death, and he was a surgeon, so he was kind of just pragmatic about the thing. Well, you're here and then you're not. I think that either it's one of two things. Either there's nothing and this is just like a happenstance thing where we're like quarks that came into existence and here we are and we're going to recede in the material of space time, and we crest and then we recede back into the earth. But the optimist in me likes to think that there's something out there. And I think it's confusing because if you answer the question through a religious standpoint, a lot of religions were written a long time ago, and it's hard to negotiate what religion might say versus what science is now saying. I find the most compelling thing is through quantum mechanics, which is basically talking about really small particles within atoms. And in the past, we've known about larger objects, meaning like you have an Earth and you have a moon. You have an apple falling from a tree. That's Newtonian physics. And Einstein was talking about larger objects in space-time, his theory of relativity and things like that. But when and at the end of Einstein's era, he couldn't understand the small side of physics. And the small side of physics has to do with small particles and how they behave if you observe them. And what we think from those is that our material world is basically made of energy, and that waves of light that create the material world, which I would call like heavy energy. They're very much just statistically waveforms, basically. So it's as if the world has a potential to exist, and then once it's observed, then it does exist. It's a weird kind of concept, and I'll get to the question of life and death in a second. But so think about this. It's like if you and I are just material that has a pluripotential manifestation into the world, meaning we could be here or we could not be here. There's an idea out there that this is a simulation, and that whoever put this in like pushed the play button and created this world, it's almost like a video game. And if you observe matter in the world, or if you say you like observe like this perspective, it then comes alive. It requires somebody to observe it for it to pop up. It's a difficult concept to explain, I guess. When it comes to death, I think that the best indication that something comes after death is probably from near-death experience studies, because they're so similar and they've happened in different cultures where people have explained a similar phenomenon. And it wasn't until I noticed that physicians who passed away, or scientists, and then these people came back from a near-death experience, they were profoundly changed by what had happened to them. And what they talk about is like, this is just a testing ground to kind of purify your soul more, to learn how to love, to learn how to learn things, how to do things. And that if you don't have a crucible like Earth to go through these hardships, that you don't develop your soul. And when you die, you transition back to a more of an energy state that is not limited by this physical realm. And it's really our brains and our bodies that limit us from knowing what else is out there. Much like, if the sun is shining, you can't see the stars and you can't see the universe. Like the sun is kind of blinding. In this case, human consciousness might be, or the brain could be the sun, where once the brain is dead and your body's dead, you can then see the immensity of what's out there really on the other side, so to speak. So I think that it's probably such a fantastic thing that happens if we were to die and go on. I don't think it's a heaven and hell version. I think this is probably living on Earth is as hellish as many things you can ever imagine. I mean, think of all the terrible things that happen in the world. So I think if you can get through this living process, that there's a good chance that on the other side, there's actually something very profound. And whoever created this whole thing, I don't think they just did it in a very simple and basic way. I think it's probably more than our brains can understand, like our human brains can understand. But I don't know. That's a really long answer.
Yeah, that was actually really comforting.
That's
a good one to end on.
A very good one to end. All right, I'll see you next time then.
See you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.